Genesis 6 talks about giants, real giants walking the earth. The Bible calls them the Nephilim. It says they were the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of humans. So who were these giants? Where do they come from? Some people say aliens came down and made it with humans. Others say they were fallen angels. Some think they were just tall warriors. But these weren't normal people. These were giants, and their story is one of the strangest in the entire Bible. Today, we're going to figure out what's actually going on here. Let's demystify this. Let's read the full passage, Genesis 6, verses 1 to 4. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown." If you just read that and thought, wait, what? Giants? Sons of God? What is happening? You're not alone. This passage has confused readers for thousands of years. Who are the sons of God? Who are these giants called the Nephilim? And why does this bizarre story about giants appear right before the flood? Let's break it down. The first major interpretation is called the Sethite view. This theory says the sons of God were the godly descendants of Seth, Adam's third son, and the daughters of humans were the ungodly descendants of Cain. The idea is that the righteous line of Seth intermarried with the wicked line of Cain, and their offspring, the Nephilim, were simply powerful, violent men. The giants weren't actually giants. Men of renown just means they were famous warriors or rulers who seemed larger than life. This view became popular with early church fathers like Augustine because it avoids the weirdness of supernatural beings having children with humans. But here's the problem. The text doesn't say sons of Seth or daughters of Cain. It says sons of God and daughters of humans. And throughout the Old Testament, the phrase sons of God, Hebrew Beni Elohim, is used specifically for angelic beings. In Job 1:6, the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. These are clearly spiritual beings, not humans. Job 38 verse 7 says, "The morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy at creation." Again, angelic beings. And when we see these giants later in the Bible, like when the Israelite spies go into the Promised Land, they're described as actual giants, not just metaphorically tall. So while the Sethite view tries to keep things normal, it doesn't fit the language or the context. The second view, and the one most ancient Jewish and early Christian scholars held, is that the sons of God were fallen angels who rebelled against God. Here's the theory. These angels saw human women, lusted after them, abandoned their proper place in the spiritual realm, and took human wives. Their offspring were the Nephilim, giants, mighty warriors, men of renown. This explains why Genesis 6 immediately precedes the flood. The corruption wasn't just moral, it was genetic. These giants, these Nephilim, were corrupting humanity at a fundamental level. God had to wipe the slate clean. Now, I know what you're thinking. Can angels even do that? The Bible doesn't give us a biology lesson, but listen to what the New Testament says. Jude 6:7 says, "And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day." In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. Jude is directly connecting rebellious angels with sexual sin in a similar way to Sodom and Gomorrah. 2 Peter 2:4 says, "God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment." If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on their ungodly people. Peter links sinning angels directly to the time of the flood. So what were these giants? Here's what the evidence points to. The sons of God were fallen angels who violated their created order. The Nephilim were their offspring, giants, mighty warriors, men of renown. Genesis 6:4 even says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. After the flood? Yes, these giants showed up again in the Promised Land. Numbers 13:33, when the Israelite spies scouted the Promised Land, they reported, "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." These were giants, real giants, so tall that grown men felt like grasshoppers next to them. Later, we meet Goliath, a giant from Gath, over 9 feet tall, possibly a descendant of these Nephilim bloodlines. 1 Samuel 17:4 says, "A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. That's over 9 feet tall." David fought a giant, a literal giant. So why does this matter? Why does the Bible include this strange story about giants? Because it shows the extent of the corruption before the flood. It wasn't just that humans were sinful. There was a spiritual rebellion happening, fallen angels trying to corrupt God's creation, producing these giants that terrorized the earth. God's response? The flood. Wipe out the corruption. Start fresh with Noah. And even after the flood, when the giants show up again in the Promised Land, God commands Israel to drive them out. Why? Because they represented the enemy's attempt to corrupt and dominate God's people. This isn't just ancient mythology, it's spiritual warfare. It's the story of God protecting His creation from forces and giants that want to destroy it. It's one of the weirdest parts of the Bible, but it's there for a reason. It shows us that spiritual rebellion has real physical consequences, that evil doesn't just exist in our hearts, it's a cosmic battle that produced literal giants. And it reminds us that God doesn't tolerate corruption forever. He acts, He judges, He cleanses. Here's my challenge. Don't sanitize the Bible. Don't skip the weird parts about giants and supernatural rebellion. Dig into them. Ask questions. The Bible is stranger, deeper, and more fascinating than we give it credit. If you want more videos tackling the parts of the Bible nobody talks about, subscribe and hit the bell. Welcome to Demystifying the Bible. The Bible has giants, and that's not a mistake.